Today on Locked On Suns, it's draft week. Let's dive into some prospects. Zach Cohen of RealGM is here to break down the James Jones guys, the non-James Jones guys, and we got a little bit of news, of course, as well, as always, this time of year. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon Kleen, your host, and a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, as well as the host of the Just Basketball Show. Welcome into Locked On Suns. Thank you for making us your first listen to kick off your Tuesday. We're what? By the time you're hearing this, 36 hours from draft day or draft time or so. Appreciate you kicking off your day here. We're going to break down prospects. We're going to look at the news and all sorts of different angles on this draft. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. We got a new episode for you every day this week as the offseason really kicks in. And, of course, throughout the entire offseason, Monday through Friday. Become an everydayer right here on the show. Get locked onto the Suns throughout the summer. Joining us today for the first time, too long, really, frankly, but Zach Cohen of RealGM. We're going to break down all of these sorts of prospects. First, today's show, guys, is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. The playoffs are winding down in basketball and hockey, but the sports never stop at FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everybody every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Zach, we got some news to cover before we get into the James Jones guys of this draft, which I definitely think is going to be fun. But John Gambadoro of Arizona Sports reported on, I'm assuming his radio show here, which is still going on as we're recording this, that the Suns are interested in... The Suns have discussed, it sounds like, a deal centered on their own 22nd overall pick as well as Utah's 29 and 32 picks. That comes after there was some noise that the Jazz wanted to move into the high teens, or I guess the late teens. That felt a little biting off more than they really could chew there. 22 makes a lot more sense. What do you think of this construct? It's exactly what we've been talking about for a while, but Utah specifically, 29-32, what are your thoughts?
I think it makes a lot of sense of what we've heard the Suns want to do. I mean, it seems like they are interested in picking up some picks later in the draft. Obviously, adding assets for this team is really important. Then you look at some of the guys that the Suns have worked out so far, Tyler Smith, Jalen Tyson, those are guys that are expected to go a little closer to that 29 range than they are 22. So it makes a lot of sense. I would be pretty ecstatic, honestly, if we ended up doing this. But I will say, I'm nervous about them potentially taking Bronny James with that 32 pick, and then you just kind of swapped 22 and 29 for no reason. Hopefully there's really not much there with Bronny unless you're acquiring a pick, late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah, 32 is like right on the cusp, of where I would hope, if that actually was what they did, that they would just ignore Bronny. And, we've heard from Gambo for a while that, like, for instance, Kolek is somebody that they do like, but maybe not at 22, and maybe their interest in him was kind of with the idea in the back of their mind that, hey, we might not be picking at 22, and then we would like him even more later on. I don't really know where this all would be headed as far as which players, but I agree. If it ends up that 32 is Bronny and they're just dropping 7 picks to get Bronny, like, that starts to be dicey. But you had an interesting idea to package a lot of different elements of this together. I want you to give it to the people. Also, got to give you a little bit of grief for the we that you threw out there, but that's all right. It's understandable. You're not the first. You won't be the last on the podcast, but there you go.
I deserve more grief because I'm a newer fan too. But yeah, I will throw out. I think that a decent construct for the Suns would be turning 22 and Nurkic, including the 2031 pick, whether that's unprotected or not. Probably, you would rather it not be, but I think it would probably have to be in this case. But getting 29, 32, Jordan Clarkson, and Walker Kessler. I think that's a trade where you kind of nail a lot of the things you need out of this offseason. I know I've seen a lot of Suns fans that do want Kessler. I think that Jordan Clarkson's a player that fits really nicely. So I think that's a trade that could do a lot of good for Phoenix.
I would love it. obviously, and I think you would be on the same page as me here, like the specifics of a deal like that touch so many different things, probably unlikely in the grand scheme of things. But I said this on Monday's show when we heard that Kessler could be available, and we knew that Utah had 2 picks in the general range of what a trade back could look like. Just keep an eye on the Jazz. So here we are. That seems to be coming closer and closer to fruition. I'll just say again, I love Walker Kessler. I think last year was an aberration. I would even say the World Cup was an aberration. I think playing him in a system that's a little more built around him on the defensive end, on a team that's trying to win, especially if he's only, in a concentrated role, like he would be awesome. He was tinkering with corner threes and things like that as a rookie. We've talked about, could Nurkic have a career second act with Bud the way that Brook Lopez did? Give me Kessler, and it won't even be a second act. We'll just make it a first act, and then, Clarkson, of course, we all know about. So I love it. I think the fact that these conversations are ongoing is great. I would imagine that a lot of this would be predicated upon, if we're hearing that Utah wants to move up, I would imagine they have at least one guy that they really like, that they're trying to get. So part of me thinks this might be something that would happen once the draft is already in full swing, rather than Tuesday morning or something. So that's kind of where I see this headed. But all right, with that out of the way, give us your first. Do we need to describe what a James Jones guy is? I feel like if somebody's listening to this show in the middle of June, they probably know.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe because I did tell you before that I think that Ryan Dunn is like a half James Jones guy. So I don't know if you want me to get into that right now, but I do think a Jones guy is an older college player that has proven that they can play at a high level for a long period of time. I don't think we're talking about, one of these talented younger players in college. I also don't think we're really talking about the G League guys or even the international guys. So I think it's, an upperclassman that can do at least something very well. That's where I think that Dunn does kind of fit the bill, or it's like he's a little bit of an older sophomore that we know for a fact is an elite defender. So I do think that he's kind of towing the line of being a Jones guy, even though obviously he can't shoot, and Jones loves his shooters.
Yeah, that's kind of the other aspect of it, right? Is it feels like for the most part, Jones has leaned, and this isn't even like just in the draft, he has leaned skill over athleticism and shooting over other types of impact that somebody could have on the offensive end. To me, it's like Cam Johnson. Like that. Yeah. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Not a freak athlete, but obviously an NBA caliber athlete, big shooter, older than hell. Even for a senior, he was a year older than normal. Like that. That's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. But yeah, let's just start with Ryan Dunn. So he is a sophomore from Virginia. He was on another. To refer to Gambo again, he listed another player today that the Suns could consider on Wednesday at 22 or wherever they end up picking, and Dunn was the guy for Monday's episode of the Burns and Gambo show. So tell us more about him. I have kind of dismissed him because I didn't feel like he fit the bill, but I also just want to say, like, we're not positive Jones is calling the shots. I keep saying that, not like he has no control, but is a James Jones guy for sure where the Suns go? I'm not positive there, so he's definitely worth talking about. Give us your brief thoughts on Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, I mean, I will quickly say that the workout list does not suggest that Jones is running the show anymore. I mean, like it's a little bit of a mix of both. So I do think that Dunn kind of toes the line, like I just said. I think that you're getting a player that for a fact is an elite defender. He's 6'8", has about a 7'1" wingspan. He's a guy that I think can immediately come into the NBA and defend almost 1 through 5 and probably guard the best player on the other team on a nightly basis. I think that if you look back to the last year, sticking him into the Timberwolves series, like having a guy that could guard Edwards would have been really nice. I mean, obviously, like you're talking about a guy that also can't shoot the basketball. So it's going to be hard to find ways to play him on the offensive end. But, there were fans clamoring for Josh Okogie to play. And that this is a guy that is about 4 inches taller, plays actually on the wing, can cut, can finish at the rim. I do think that his jumper, for as bad as it's been, he shot really poorly from 3, shot about like 50% from the free throw line. It's ugly, but I don't think that there's any clear hitches in his shot. And apparently he's shooting the ball well in pre-draft workouts. So maybe, that shot comes along and you're talking about a player that's going to significantly outplay his draft position. But at the very least, you're looking at, potentially like a Matisse Thybulle who just got paid a decent amount of money, is a rotation player in this league. And, obviously a player like that comes into the league with a pretty high floor because they're doing something really well and they're fitting on this Suns team where perimeter defense, wing defense is very much needed.
Yeah, here's the thing, I guess the case to make on his offensive. One, I think the fact that he's 6'8" goes a long way, and Okogie being smaller has hurt him. So there's that. But also, you mentioned good finisher, 69% at the rim and 42% on 2-point jumpers. So I don't know. I haven't watched him enough to know for sure, but there's at least some indicators that could make you feel like he could at least get to being playable on the offensive end. And if he can even get there, you're talking about, probably a guy that can get some minutes in the playoffs eventually, and that's a good sign. All right, we'll keep going with James Jones guys and turn the page to some non-James Jones guys that Zach likes that maybe could be equally in consideration, given that we are not really positive what the situation is in that front office. So we'll talk about those all next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. We love sports, all of us, so much. We never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. That's just what's the reality is this time of year, unless you're into some of the tiny niche sports or you're really an Olympics head. Look, there's no NBA, there's no NFL. The WNBA is not very consistent. There's only a few games each night, if that. And so you get a little sad. But FanDuel keeps you going and is going to keep you going. Keep the sports going whenever you want all summer long. All you got to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime you're in the mood, and this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus each and every day. That's right. There's something for everybody every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer right now. I'm looking at Copa America, which frankly, I know I just did the whole thing of there's not a lot of sports, but soccer's been more than enough for me lately. U.S.-Panama on Thursday, I believe. U.S. is big favorites. So I feel like you just kind of probably don't want to put your money there. But anytime goal scorer, Balogun is plus 135. Pulisic, plus 165. Pepe, who had like 6 shots on goal and couldn't get anything to go in the other night, plus 140. Those are always fun. Whatever you want to do, FanDuel has tons of odds on every single thing you could possibly look at. FanDuel's official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Get started today. All right, let's keep it rolling here, Zach. Give me your next James Jones guy. Rifle through a few. Rifle through some of the other people you have on your list where you're like, if it's Jones and it's going to be like 2020 or 2019 times 2 or 2018, this is going to be the guys that they look at.
I have a list of 5. I'll go in order of where I think they're going to go with it. I mean, Tristan Da Silva is one that I think is the ultimate James Jones guy. I think he's a little bit too early, but I just put him here because there's a slight chance he drops a few spots. But then I would go Tyler Kolek, I think is probably the guy that we've been hearing most. Jalen Tyson is one that is a Jones guy, and he's a guy that I really like. And then I think Baylor Shireman is a player that Jones will be very interested in. That's one where I think it's very, very similar to the Cam Johnson pick. And then I put Zach Edey here, who I also think is probably not going to last to this point, but I think it's somebody that Jones would see as someone that he could trust to play almost immediately.
Okay, let's talk about Shireman, actually, within that group. Those are good names. We don't have time to deep dive on everybody. So give me the down low on Shireman. So 5-year player, finished at Creighton. He is how old? Tell us how old he is, because I'm not seeing that in the notes that I had. And
he'll turn 24 early next season.
So yeah, this is Cam Johnson 2.0 for sure. He is a lefty. Probably has one of the claims, and I mean this with all love. If this ever got back to him and the Suns draft him, and I have to face him down, I can own this. Probably looks the least like an NBA player of anybody that I've seen in this draft. It's all right, whatever. We all love Jarrett Dudley in the Valley. It also could get beyond that list. It's all right. Okay, but tell us, with jokes aside, tell us about Shireman and why he could make some sense.
Yeah, so I think if you're not looking at a draft at Dalton Connect, you might be talking about Shireman as the best shooter in the draft. He's a guy that shoots just about 40% on 8 attempts per game. Like, he really fires them away. He has really, really deep range. He could shoot off movement. He could shoot from super deep. He can rebound the basketball at a very high level for a wing that's only 6'7" or so. And then he's also a pretty good passer. Like he played on ball a lot at South Dakota State before transferring to Creighton. So there's a little bit of point forward ability there. Probably not a guy that you really want to be running a lot of offense, but somebody that could definitely make plays, especially on a team with Phoenix where he wouldn't be getting a lot of attention, would be playing a lot of scrambling defenses. So I think that Shireman's a player that can come in immediately, knock down some shots, do a lot of different things on the offensive end. I think the biggest concern with Shireman is obviously the age. There's not a lot of upside with a player that's 24 years old and not really very athletic. And he's also a player that can struggle defensively, but at the very least, you're talking about someone that has good size on the wing. So I don't think he's going to kill you there.
Okay, with Shireman, give me your best estimation. How likely do you think the defense is to translate? Because Brandon and I were kind of debating this on Monday that it feels like I think the Suns need this player to contribute some as a rookie to justify keeping the pick. As flawed of a process as that might feel, I just think that's kind of where they are. Is he somebody who has hope of being able to do that in year one, or would it have to be like, oh, he gets experience and kind of like figures out the NBA game and then he can play some defense and still maybe like an 8th, 9th man?
I think the defense would be a small problem in year one, but I think he's definitely capable of playing pretty big minutes, maybe like 18 to 20 right off the bat, just because of the way he can shoot the ball. And I am kind of in the camp with you where I think that this pick needs to hit no matter where it is. I know a lot of people want it to be point guard, want it to be a center, but I think the most important thing is they do get a contributor in this draft. So I do think it's something that Jones would consider, even if it's a little off the board at 22. Maybe this is the guy that they're looking at if they're picking up an extra pick at the 32 range. I think he's definitely a contributor right away.
Okay, and run through your favorite non-James Jones guy options, and we'll hit on a couple and then pick back up with it on the other side of the break.
Yeah, so it's tough because I'm kind of looking at the fallers at this point. So I think like an Isaiah Collier is a guy that the Suns really should consider if he is there at 22. I know it'd be really tempting for them to pass on him like every other team would be doing, but I just don't think that the talent level on Phoenix is where you could just pass on somebody that was viewed as a top 5 pick before the draft. So I think that if Collier gets there, you're talking about an explosive playmaker, somebody that obviously disappointed. His jump shot isn't there right now, but I do think that the situation at USC was bad for everybody. Like I've mentioned it with Bronny James in the past. Like I don't think it was much better for Collier. I think you're talking about a team that did not space the floor very well, was not very talented. I think there was a lot of pressure on Collier. I think that if you were put into a situation where he's playing with Devin Booker, with Bradley Beal, with Kevin Durant, you're playing with a lot more space, a lot more room to attack. I think you're looking at a player that would thrive in that situation. I think that he probably can give them a little bit off the bench in year one. I think that you're obviously looking way down the line with Collier potentially being a franchise cornerstone if he does end up hitting on the jumper.
Yeah, I'll just say on guys like that, to me, we talked about him a little bit yesterday, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, like you kind of got to throw history out the window a little bit with Matt Ishbia, at least for the foreseeable future. And the idea that they take somebody like that and then turn right around and trade him at the deadline or something, it's like not inconceivable, you know? So there is like a certain caliber of player where just from a value standpoint, you almost have to consider it. I also wouldn't be surprised if, again, that type of fall for a player ends up becoming the situation we were talking about at the beginning of the show, where now you're getting calls you weren't getting before to trade down, and you bypass it, and maybe you get a little more for that trade down than you would want. So I like Collier. I think he could end up being one of the better players in this draft. I mentioned, like, to me, we've seen a lot of guards who struggle to shoot come through the draft, and struggle to shoot still being 33-ish% is not half bad. So if that's like one of the biggest knocks on his game, it feels like that's not a huge knock. You know, it's not like Ryan Dunner, for instance, who we were just talking about, where it's like it could genuinely be hopeless, or, you know, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist from a million years ago, like that. So, you know, all right, let's talk about centers on the other side. And honestly, I'll let you tell me which of the centers you think fits best with the Suns of the guys that we know are going to be on the board. And apparently noted Aaron Holmes is already out there from Gambo, but there's a lot of other ones. We'll talk about those coming up after one quick break. All right. So Gambo on Monday also said no to Adem Bona. He is more of like a forward, so we'll take him out. No Dayron Holmes, as I mentioned there, Zach. But even aside from that, no Filipowski was also, according to Gambo, which I know is a player you like. But we still got Yves Misi. We still got potentially Zach Edey, although I don't think he'll be there anywhere near. I've seen him like it could be in the top 10 at this point, so that seems unlikely. Kalel Ware, probably the other one. So let's just go with Ware and Misi. Honestly, which of those two do you like the most straight up, and which do you think makes the most sense for what we know the Suns are going to want to do with their center this upcoming season?
Yeah, I got to say, it's a bummer that they're not interested in Filipowski, if that is true, because I do think he kind of fits the good molds of like capable of playing right now, but a lot of upside in the future. I think he fits kind of what Budenholzer wants to do in a lot of different ways. But yeah, if it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. I do think that between the two, between Misi and Ware, I would go with Misi. I just think that there's just a little bit more that he can do to fit this team right now. I think that there's not a motor problem with Misi, which there is with Ware. You know, that's the reason kind of didn't work out at Oregon. He ended up going to Indiana. He got the big minutes, but there were a lot of games where, you know, his play just kind of faded in and out. He can look like a guy that's not out there a little more often than you'd like, and I think they're a little more often than the Suns would like. So with Misi, you're talking about a punishing rim runner, somebody that could defend, you know, honestly at the point of attack a little bit if you need him to, but mostly protecting the rim. Started playing basketball late, so there's a lot of room for growth, but just a really fluid athlete, has good hands, can finish at the rim. I think the free throw shooting is not a disaster. He's probably going to be playable late in games if he's able to make the same, 60% or so he did at college. So I think that Misi's the player that can come in, give them some really valuable center minutes in a way that they haven't had in quite some time. And I do think that there's obviously room for growth with a player like him because he got that late start, because they're just such impressive raw tools that you just really don't want to give up on a player like that.
It's crazy how old this draft is. So it's funny to almost look at how what even would qualify as like a non-James Jones player in this draft, because almost everybody in their range, we talked about Tyler Smith yesterday. I think he kind of would fit that bill. I just don't think he makes much sense at all for the Suns. And Collier you mentioned, but other than that, it's like there's a lot of upperclassmen in this range, whether it's 22 or a trade back. There's a lot of guys who can shoot, so it's pretty interesting. Let's just close with one who I know whose name I have not even probably said on this show, and who is younger, but fits a little bit of what the Suns might need, which is Johnny Furphy. Give us the lowdown on him, just as another name for people to have an eye on in case he's kind of in the mix around this range.
Yeah, Furphy is like a 6'8" big wing that kind of hits the Jones, check marks with, like, he's able to shoot the ball, he can run the floor, good transition player. He's a pretty sneaky athlete. Yeah, I thought to throw in the sneaky there, but he's an athlete. He's an athlete on the wing that can shoot the basketball. He's a player that obviously has room to grow. He didn't contribute as much as you would have thought at Kansas, but he's a younger shooter in the molds of these other guys like Shireman, where you probably have a little bit more room for growth and more, upside long term. But I do think that he's a player that would be able to play in a pinch with this team right now, but I do think that it'd be a little murkier than going with one of the older guys.
Have not, done a deep dive again on anybody, but just at a surface level, reminds me of Rebecca Allen, who's playing for the Mercury this year, and the fact that they're both Australian, I'm sure, is part of why I'm thinking that way, but just kind of like an off-ball three-point shooter who has a little more in their bag and a little bit more as far as the athleticism goes than you might expect. So, I don't know. It feels like Kansas has gotten back to churning out NBA guys, so the fact that I haven't heard like a lot of hype around him in general, he's just been somebody I'm curious about, but seems unlikely for the Suns. All right. We got through a lot of guys there. We've gotten through a lot of guys as the draft process has gone along. Let's close out by each just picking who we would be most excited about the Suns getting. Now, let's be realistic. Like, let's not just say, well, if this guy who's not going to fall falls and they pick him at 22, let's be realistic here. But who would you be most happy with on Wednesday night when the 22nd pick or whatever pick gets announced, to become a new member of the Suns?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Filipowski, honestly. Like, I'm answering a question with
You're
someone
really
that
high on him.
Yeah, I just think that he's a big man that can shoot the basketball. I mean, there are some concerns over the percentages, but it looks really good. He can handle the ball a little bit. He can pass. He can play out of the post. Like, he went back to college, kind of improved everything that he needed to improve. And I think defensively, he slides his feet pretty well. He's not a guy that's going to block a lot of shots, but I think in a drop coverage scheme, he would do pretty fine. Like, he was the anchor of a Duke team that played really well defensively. So I think that he's somebody that you could trust kind of in the middle there, but I think he's somebody that offensively would fit really nicely. I would say that, like, I understand the Kolek pick if they do go with him at 22. Like, it just kind of satisfies the need of shutting everybody up that wants a point guard and then also hitting, a younger player. Like, I think that it makes a lot of sense if they do go that direction. But I will say, like, the most realistic prospects of that they're being linked to right now, that they have worked out, that Gambo has not ruled out, I would think that Jalen Tyson is the guy that I think I'd be most excited about them picking. I just think a 6'7" wing that can kind of, shoot the basketball, that can defend. He didn't defend very well last year at Cal, but that was a really, a losing team that did not play well defensively in general. I wonder if he just lost some of the edge that he had when he played for Texas Tech, when he was a bit more of a 3-and-D player. But Tyson's the guy to me that's like the Jaime Jaquez in this draft, where we're, a month or two into the season and we're like, how did that guy last until, 25 or so? So 22, if we have to take him there, I do think that Tyson's a player that's going to contribute right away, and I think he has some long-term upside.
Yeah, I would definitely I'll go Misi. I think that, like, that to me is just the perfect example of they just keep the pick and pick the guy that makes the most sense, right? I think, right now The Athletic has him going 19th. Sam Vecini has him going 19th. I don't know where it was in ESPN's latest. He might not fall. That's part of why I wanted to cover a lot of bases here. And for instance, he has Ware falling to 23. Now he also has the Suns trading back and getting the 25th pick and picking Kyle Filipowski, who you like. So, we're all kind of guessing here. And the Suns giving us this much to work with, frankly, with some workouts that have actually leaked and Gambo having more concrete evidence and everything else is unusual. But I still wouldn't be expecting that I could see something out of left field, especially like we were talking about with 29 and 32, where I would imagine 29, like, that could be Tyson. But if it's not Bronny with that other second round pick, like, I kind of think all bets are off as far as what they do. Dunn makes some sense. We could see that, but they've worked out a lot of guys that are like in that 20 to 25 range, and then a lot of guys who are in like the 50 to 80 range, So yeah. If they made a pick at like 35, for instance, I don't necessarily know where that would go. But as far as Misi, I just think, again, like, he checks the boxes of what they lacked last year: offensive rebounding, rim protection. He's a forceful, physical kind of, like, straight line athlete, and that will go a long way, whether it's backing up Nurkic or whatever the defensive, the center rotation ends up looking like. I know some people have concerns about kind of his pick and roll defensive ability and all that stuff, but, like, hey, it's a 19-year-old center that you could pencil that into scouting reports of young centers a lot, and especially ones that get taken in the 20s. They get taken in the 20s for a reason. He wouldn't be perfect, but I could see him playing, helping the team, and I would be perfectly happy with that. But I'm also kind of just rooting for chaos. Like, I just kind of want to trade. I want a player we're not thinking of. Maybe not quite as much as, like, Jalen Smith level, but I'd like to just be surprised because it's more fun that way.
I will say, like, I think one scenario that we didn't talk about that I do think is possible is I do think that there's a possibility of Dunn being there at 22 and the Suns making a move with the Knicks for 25 and 38, because they're apparently pretty high on Dunn. It makes a lot of sense seeing him in a Tom Thibodeau team. And I do think that kind of satisfies, what the Suns are looking for. Move back a little bit. Maybe you're in range there to pick Kolek or someone that's just, that they've had on their radar. And then at 38, there are some options as well. Like I think that like Jamal Shed is probably a James Jones type of player, to be honest. If they're looking to go backup point guard, get a senior leader, defensive minded point guard that if the shot hits, you're talking about one of the best backup point guards in the league. There's some upside there, but also the floor of being the backup point guard that the Suns currently need. And then I also think that there's a player in Harrison Ingram that's kind of like a James Jones player to me that also has some upside, a player that I think people thought would be a one and done prospect when he was playing at Stanford. Ended up needing to take a little bit longer, but just a really versatile wing that can, make plays off the dribble, that can defend a few spots, can shoot the three ball, honestly, a little better than he's given credit for. But I think that's an option if they do move back a little bit.
What about Brendon, where I heard it, made a trade and went off the board a little bit. Is in charge of the front office. I don't think any of them have proven themselves to be like elite decision makers, so I could care less personally, but it would at least signal that they're not just homing in on one thing, which I think is probably the biggest criticism I would give the front office over the past few years, is that it's just, we're doing this, value be damned, timing be damned, whatever. This is what we're doing. It doesn't matter. We like Jalen Smith at 10. We're going to pick him at 10. We could trade back. We're not going to. In Cam Johnson's case, they did trade back, but kind of got lucky there. And then free agency, the Beal trade, the Durant trade, all these different things. It's like, if they went off the board and picked somebody we haven't even talked about, that would at least tell me they're being a little bit more nimble and opportunistic. So I would like that. But all right, more news, more rumors, more all that as we go. Diambo will give us another name they will and pick on Tuesday, so we'll have that to react to. And then Wednesday's the draft. Maybe all this will be invalid in 48 hours, but a lot of good stuff to chew on nevertheless. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Get new episodes every day this week, including probably Saturday and Sunday. I mean, look, free agency is like 2 days after the draft, so we're not going anywhere. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody. Read Zach's scouting reports at RealGM. He's written about a lot of the guys we talked about today. That's good content to keep getting your mind ready for Wednesday's draft, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.